What is this? I need to build a record cabinet. And because I like to set myself up for failure, I decided to add not one, not two, but 3 new build processes to one project. Tambour doors, kerf bending plywood, and brass inlays. And as you'll see, only one of these processes went smoothly, and I had to do some serious problem solving to figure out how to make this all work. I picked up some 8-quarter walnut from my local hardwood dealer, and for those who don't understand what that is, there's a sizing system for hardwood that works in 1/4-inch increments. So 4-quarter is 1 inch thick, or usually a little less. 8-quarter is around 2 inches, and 12-quarter is 3 inches. And that's just the rough measurement without a clean flat surface. So if you're wanting a board to finish at 3/4 of an inch for a project, you're gonna use 4-quarter, or in my case, I wanna finish about 1 3/4 inches, 1.5 inches. So I'm using 8-quarter. I do want to apologize for dropping that much math on you so early in this video. Okay, once I've got all those boards flattened and straight edge, I can glue them all up into panels. And if you've been watching my videos for the last few months, you've seen me use these Rockler panel clamps a bunch. Now, you guys know that I work with Rockler, but they never asked me to highlight a specific product, and I basically get to pick what works best for me. And I've got to say, these clamps have been the MVP of my shop since I got them in. They're not cheap, but definitely worth the investment if you're gonna be doing a lot of panel glue ups. Real quick, let's jump into the design. So I've been wanting to try my hand at making tambour doors for years now, and this was the perfect project to finally give it a go. Tambour doors are made from individual strips of wood, and they have a fabric backer, and that allows the doors to open and close and kind of push around a curve. I also designed this piece to have a pill shape, which is gonna require me to kerf in some plywood to bend it around a radius that matches that pill shape. And last, I added this brass inlay pattern to the top. I'm making the ends of the cabinet using plywood and a technique called kerf bending. That's where you cut a bunch of grooves into a piece of plywood and it allows you to bend it around a form. Now, I already cut this piece off camera and did some testing with my templates, and it worked really well. I made some clamping templates that are designed to match the exact inside radius of the edges of both sides of the cabinet. Cut them out on the CNC, added a bunch of holes so I can have places to clamp to. It worked on the test piece, and now I need to cut up some plywood. I can do the real thing. I'm using some 3/4-inch Baltic birch plywood and cutting grooves along the width of the piece, and the thickness of a saw blade is called the kerf, hence the name kerf bending. Now, the kerf of a typical table saw blade is 1/8 inch, and then I'm spacing these cuts 1/8 inch apart. I'm also cutting about 5/8 inch or a little bit more through the piece, and if you don't cut through deep enough, that piece won't actually bend. It always sucks putting on gloves when you're already sweaty. Okay, so we're gonna kerf bend this panel that I cut. I've got the relief cuts, so it's gonna be able to have more of a kind of a 90-degree turn around this edge. I'm gonna use a stupid amount of glue, and then for these little dados, sure, we'll call them dados. Some of this Total Boat Thixo fast curing epoxy adhesive. It's a stressful glue up, like in the pantheon of stressful glue ups. I wouldn't say it's like tops. That's more glue than you use on most projects, and that did absolutely nothing. Another thing that I'm not worried about is getting every single kerf glued all the way to the end. And the reason for that is I made this panel oversized. When it's all done, I can trim it down. I believe it's 2 inches oversized at this point. Insert Michael Scott clip of That's What She Said.
That's what she said?
It is 12 gallons of glue. Now comes the fun part. Now, I found it was best to start in the middle and then work my way clamping each section moving outward. And when I flipped it on its side, only about 6 gallons of that 12 gallons of glue that I used leaked out. Once it's all clamped up, I can add that Thixo epoxy to the gaps on the corners, and then I proceeded to fill the remaining gaps along the piece with more Thixo, and this really added extra rigidity throughout the whole piece. Okay, so up next, I'm gonna apply some of this PSA veneer. You guys have seen me use this in multiple projects. I love this stuff. I get it from Rockler, and of course, I'll have a link down below. Feels like the first time. One of the things I really like about using PSA veneer, take this for what it's worth, because I've never used any other type of veneer. I know with normal veneers, you use contact cement and you use it on both surfaces, let that dry, and then as soon as you touch those two surfaces together, it creates instant bond. If you get it wrong, you're kind of screwed. This stuff, if I get it wrong, I can pull it right back up. So it doesn't activate the adhesive until I apply the pressure roller. Then I just give it a nice firm roll. These panels I'm making are the dividers that create the speaker housing inside the cabinet, and then that longer piece that you saw me make earlier was the back panel. Now, of those 3 new processes I'm trying on this build, making the tambour doors was the thing that I was most apprehensive about, since there are literally so many moving parts. It just feels as if the potential for failure is much higher. Now, to make tambour, I'm cutting up some maple boards into 1/2-inch strips. And I estimated that I needed about 35 strips for each door, plus I threw in a couple extra, just in case. And this made for a grand total of 80 tambour strips. I made this jig here where I could sandwich 40 tambour strips at a time, and this allows me to flatten them all at once on the CNC. And then I also use the CNC to cut in the rabbet on the top and the bottom, and this is what allows the tambour strips to drop into the tracks, but still have the doors extend out over the track, which is going to give the whole thing a floating appearance. Now, I did end up with some inconsistencies with the length of the tambour strips, so I came up with this little jig on my crosscut sled to kind of solve this. And what I did was I just super glued a 1/16 inch shim to the sled, and then that provided a positive stop, and I can cut all 80 of those strips on both sides to have evenly sized ends. Not that size matters all that much, at least that's what I tell my wife. Oh Lord, she is gonna kill me for that one. Speaking of being a lord or a lady, let's talk about Established Titles, the sponsor of today's video. Established Titles is a great gift idea based on the custom in Scotland where landowners are referred to as lairds, or lords and ladies. With Established Titles, you buy as little as 1 square foot plot of land on a private estate in Scotland, thus allowing someone to call themselves a lord or a lady. And the best part is Established Titles partners with One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future to support global reforestation and plant a tree with every order. You receive a certificate with a unique plot number so you can see the exact location of your plot of land. You can officially change your name to Lord or Lady and even get credit cards and plane tickets in your name with that title. Or even your pets. I chose my dog Norman to become Lord Norman of Buildshire. Norman, I now dub you Lord Norman of Buildshire. Here you go. It's an amazing last-minute gift, and Established Titles is running a massive sale. Plus, if you use the code JohnnyBuilds, you get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/JohnnyBuilds to get your gifts now and support this channel. So before I go carving into these big, expensive walnut glue-ups, I made a prototype of the tambour mechanism on a couple sheets of plywood. I did this at the suggestion of my buddy, Michael Alm. He's got an awesome video where he made this plywood tambour bench. And besides being an amazing video, it's been a wealth of information on several techniques that I'm using on this video. I called Michael up and he suggested that I go ahead and make a little prototype. You know, these are 1/2-inch pieces, and this groove is about 0.6 inches, so 1/10 of an inch over. It's working fantastically. So I think we're ready to carve the real thing. You guys, walnut is crazy expensive these days, yet I keep designing pieces made from walnut because, well, it just looks good, and I'm a glutton for punishment apparently. This time I bought a little extra, but I ended up spending about $450 for just a couple 8/4 and a couple 4/4 walnut boards that I'm using on this build. And this is a piece for my own home, so I can't just pass off the material cost to a client. All that to say that I really don't want to screw up these carves, and as you'll see, I did screw up. several times, and it was kind of nerve-wracking working with material this expensive. And this project really tested my ability to fix mistakes. And plus, I was feeling so good, and I was telling my wife all about how good this project was going, how quickly I was gonna have it done, we could go on a date night, everything was great. All for that just to come crashing back down to earth. But not here. This part went well. Okay, back to those tambour strips. I'm adding a very slight round over to each strip. The ends of each door where the two doors meet are made from walnut, and then those have a groove cut into them that I can insert a piece of brass bar, which is gonna act as the door pull. Something else that I learned from watching Michael Alm's tambour video was that the best fabric backing to use is just a piece of canvas drop cloth, which I picked up this cheap one off Amazon, and then I cut that into 2 strips for the backing material. Now I'm just using regular old wood glue to adhere the canvas to the back of the door, and I've got all these tambour pieces back in that jig that I made earlier. This really allowed me to keep everything tight and aligned and made this glue up pretty simple. Now, I let the glue dry for about an hour, and then I pulled the door out of the jig. It had set up enough I wasn't worried about the canvas coming off, but I needed to manipulate each strip and pull them apart to make sure that they didn't get glued together. And as you see, some of the glue did seep through the cracks, and I had to use a chisel to prise some of the tambour apart. So I made my Kerf bent end caps extra long so I could cut them back to size evenly. And while these Kerf bent glue ups actually came out really nice, they did cause me some pretty big issues when I tried to put this whole cabinet together. But for now, I'm just rocking along, thinking everything is great, and the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, and all that crap. I did add some Bondo to fill the remaining gaps, and then added some more PSA veneer to both the inside and the outside of those Kerf bent end caps. And like I said earlier, I also made these end caps extra wide so I can cut them back to proper size after the veneer was applied. And this is why you see that veneer doesn't reach all the way to the end. So I set that aside and grabbed the panel that I glued up off camera, and this is gonna be the divider panels that separate the record storage inside the cabinet. Now, like I did on the last record cabinet I made, I designed these to have a half circle cutout, which makes it easier to access the records, and I cut this over on the CNC. And this part is for all you purist woodworkers out here. Here I am, using a chisel like a Neanderthal to square off the grooves that were cut by a 1/2-inch CNC bit. Now, if that's not traditional woodworking, well, I don't know what is. Okay, while I'm building the base, I wanna let y'all know something that I'm really excited about. So all the time I get tons of questions asking me about CNCs and which model to get and how you use them. And then I get asked about my design process and what software I use. And I always get a ton of questions about working with epoxy. And I've been really interested in putting together an online course where I can dive in much deeper into those topics than I'm able to get in these videos. But I need your help in honing in on exactly what will be the most beneficial to you, my viewers. So we put together a little survey. It should take you about 5 minutes to fill out. And this is really gonna help me dial in exactly what you all want to see, which is my ultimate goal for an online course above anything else. So if you've got 5 minutes, I'd really appreciate it if you took the survey. And I'm also running a contest for those that fill out the survey and drop a comment in this video letting me know you took the survey. The winner is going to get a Jonny Builds prize pack, including a t-shirt, a hat, and a couple other goodies. I'd be really grateful if after you watch this, you take the survey, or go do it now, but make sure you come back and watch the rest of the video so you don't miss how everything on this build went horribly wrong and how I was able to fix it. And I'll be announcing the winner of the prize pack in a YouTube live event that I'm doing next Saturday, where I'm also gonna answer your viewer questions that you guys might have. This live chat I think is gonna be a lot of fun. It's gonna be great to hang out with my viewers, and you're definitely not gonna wanna miss that. On to doing those brass inlays, and this is where things really started to get dicey on me. So first I have to align the piece back on the top of the CNC and reestablish my work zero. And then using this crazy tiny 16th inch bit that I was positive was gonna break immediately, I proceeded to carve a 1/10 of an inch wide groove that I'm gonna insert brass bar on the top of this piece. And somehow throughout all these carves, that tiny little bit stayed intact. And I really think the woodworking gods wanted me to get my hopes up that the remaining brass inlay process was gonna go just as smoothly. And like you guys have seen me do a bunch, I'm sealing the surface with a coat of Total Boat Gleam varnish before using epoxy to inlay the brass. But first, I gotta get myself all psyched up to do these inlays. Gotta get into it, okay. Now it's time to do the brass inlay. I got this brass bar. It's 36 inches long, it's a 1/4 inch wide, and it's like 0.09 inches thick. So a little less than 1/10 of an inch thick. And the fit is just perfect. But I wanted it to be set in deeper, so hopefully it'll have a better bond with the wood and not risk delaminating later on. I've got to cut all these pieces down to size. I want to cut them just a hair oversized so they really have a nice press fit down into the grooves. And then I'm going to have to come here on the ends. As thin as this is, you can bend it pretty easy. Okay, we're gonna use some of this Total Boat 4-minute epoxy. So I'm using the quick drying 4-minute epoxy, but in hindsight, I think it would have been better to use the Total Boat High Performance, which takes about an hour or more to set up. And you can sand brass, which I was doing off camera, but that was taking forever and it was heating up a whole bunch. So I thought I'd try machining the brass over on the CNC. And initially this seemed to work really well. However, when it started doing the second pass, that strip at the bottom of the screen delaminated and popped up out of its groove. So first I tried hand routing a deeper pocket with that 16th inch bit, but naturally it immediately broke. So this time I did use Total Boat High Performance Epoxy to inlay the new piece, but there wasn't enough depth left in that groove to make this work properly. And I knew going into this was probably not gonna work. And at first it seemed good, but then when I started flattening, everything went to hell again. For the second time, this piece has come up out of the groove, which is really frustrating. What's happening is, as the bit is passing over this, obviously it's creating heat. Since I'm not flattening the whole thing, it's just going back and forth over the same piece. That heat is building up. That heat then melts the epoxy and it comes right out. I don't know how I'm gonna fix this yet. My first idea was to use some gold epoxy to replace this, and that's gonna look sort of similar to the brass. So I did this test pour on my silicone mat, and right away, I didn't like it. It was too orangey and it just wasn't gonna look good with the brass. I asked Katie what she thought, and she really liked the idea of the white epoxy inlays like I've done in a lot of my other projects. And to me, this made sense since my record player and my speakers are white as well. Again, I used the CNC to plan out the brass inlay and then cut in that same pattern with an 1/8 inch bit. Now, at this point, I thought my biggest setback was the brass inlays and that was all behind me. That proved not to be true. So knowing the kerf bent end pieces likely would match the sharper radius on the bottom and top piece, I added an 1/8 of an inch when I carved it to each end with the idea that I could just flush trim everything to perfectly match the kerf bent ends. Now, that was my plan as I'm putting this all together, and I even bought a 2-inch length of cut flush trim bit. Knowing using that flush trim bit was going to be a bit precarious, I tested this off camera hoping I would dial everything in, and instead, it all went horribly wrong and I caught none of it on camera. So 2 inches is a lot to flush trim all at once. Even though I sanded all the excess to where it was less than an 1/8 of an inch, I still had a huge chunk tear out. And when I was trying to fix that, I sanded through one of the veneers on the kerf bent end caps. And at that point, I realized I needed to scrap that whole kerf bent end cap idea altogether and just go back to the drawing board. So if you're keeping score at home, I tried 3 new techniques and 2 of the 3 failed miserably. Now, I'm sure I'm gonna get comments telling me that I suck, that I'm not a real woodworker, I'm used to that one, and a bunch of other creatively hateful commentary. But the truth is, and the message I really want as many people to understand as possible, failing is good. That is, as long as you don't quit when you fail. The best things that I've ever made the best things I've ever done have all had a healthy dose of getting my ass handed to me in the process, or my brass handed to me in this case. And this is where I feel like the real opportunity to get better comes from. In this case, I went back to something that failed on the last record cabinet that I made, where I stacked CNC cut curve pieces, and I took everything that I learned from that failure to ensure that I was using the best practices in this situation. And I took care this time to make sure those pieces that I was gluing up were jointed perfectly flat. And when I did the glue up, I glued the curves in pairs first and used the flat table of my table saw to keep everything lined up as best that I could. Not that I recommend using your table saw for glue ups. Then I glued those pairs into the 2 end caps of 8 pieces, and I ended up with really good alignment among those individual pieces. And after some quick sanding, each side was perfectly flat. Moving on to the epoxy inlays, I mixed up some Total Boat 2-to-1 high performance epoxy and tinted it white while using a syringe to inlay it into the grooves. Now, you guys know that Total Boat has been my longtime sponsor, and I've got links for all the Total Boat products that I use down below. Rockler is my other longtime sponsor, and I've got links for all those Rockler products as well. The next day that epoxy was cured and I can sand all that excess down. I also just picked up this knot filling hot glue gun, and I'm really annoyed that I didn't get this sooner. I've seen this a bunch on Instagram, and while it was sort of expensive, $300, it filled those knots so well, so fast, and looked just as good as epoxy and much better than any CA glue fills that I've ever done. The Kerf bent end caps were already cut to size, so I'm just using these to measure the replacement walnut glue ups. And a nice bonus, each of these offcuts makes a nice boomerang. So look for those in my Etsy store, Jonny Rangs. Okay, at this point, I'm starting to feel good about this project again, and it's time to put it all together. So I'm just gluing on those ends to the bottom piece first, and then gluing in all the partitions. And if you follow any woodworking Instagram pages like say Jonny Builds, then you saw the recent kerfuffle over a certain brand of finish whose owner thinks it's cool to talk smack about woodworkers who work in their garage. I'm not going to go into details here. I'm not going to name any names, but I used to claim this was my favorite finish, but you'll never see it in my shop again. Now I'm trying Rubio Monocoat for the first time, and I've got to say, I'm impressed. It's a little bit tedious to apply, but the whole process goes on much quicker than doing multiple spray coats, and it's 0 VOCs, which I really like. For the tambour doors, I added some paste wax to the bottom of the wood and in the grooves at the suggestion of my buddy, Michael Alm. I'm adding the top piece, and this is just gonna get glued in place. And it took a minute here to get those 6 partitions and 2 tambour doors all aligned, but in the end, it fit together nicely, and the doors slide nice and easy without any binding. You probably have noticed that I didn't do any edge banding on those plywood panels inside the cabinet, and this is because I'm adding a 3/4 inch brass bar as edge banding. Now, I just sanded each brass bar to give it a polish and hit it with some clear spray lacquer to seal it. I filled those dowel holes that were for the original Kerf bent end caps, and then attached the brass edge banding strips with some 4-minute epoxy. And here I use a few 3/4 inch thick strips of walnut to frame in the front of the cabinet, and then I can sand the end caps smooth. The final brass detail is the brass bar that I'm using to frame in the opening of the cabinet and the tambour doors. Again, these are getting attached with some 4-minute epoxy, but then here I also use some CA glue and hit it with some activator, since there wasn't really a good way to clamp these. Now I can apply Rubio to the top of the cabinet, and I let that cure overnight, so it's going to be ready for this extra finish that I'm going to do the next day. And I also wanted to have a removable back panel, so this is just going to get attached with these wooden blocks that I'm gluing on the inside. So something I recently discovered and I've been really intrigued by is nano finishing. And I found this ceramic coating made for wood, and it's made by a company called Carbon Method. And I sort of think this is the next level and the new normal of wood finishing. And it also can be used to protect metal surfaces in your shop, such as your cast iron table saw. And this just goes right on top of the Rubio Monocoat that I already put on and let cure. The first coat is 9H hardness, and this bonds to the surface on a molecular level, leaving a nano layer of diamond-like hard glass on the surface. And my favorite part is how easy it is to apply. They've got great instructions online and how quickly you can add additional coats just an hour after each coat. I did 3 of the hard coats and then you can add 2 top coats. And this is where that brilliance and that finish really come through. And the top coat layer also helps to further protect the hard layer beneath it and add extra UV and durability protection. So you should definitely check out Carbon Method, and I've got links for that down below. Okay, all that's left is to attach the base, and I'm doing this with some figure 8 fasteners. Jeff helped me flip the piece over and I could screw on the back panel. And y'all, I've got to say, I've said it before, but I mean it with this one. This is my favorite piece yet. I mean, it was challenging, but that really makes the finished piece that much more gratifying. Let's go see what Katie thinks.
Who's right in front of me?
No one.
Oh.
I'm guiding you with my my arms. Okay. A couple more feet and almost. Okay, there you go. Okay, you ready?
Ready. Oh, it's beautiful. I love it.
It's got storage for all our records, plus
speaker cubbies.
yeah, little speaker cubbies, so those don't have to be out.
Love it.
Tambour doors.
Anything I like in here?
Dolly Parton.
Whitney Houston.
Whitney Houston.
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson.
Tom Petty. I can get down
Although,
with that.
I think your favorite, hold on. Babe, this is your favorite.
That's your favorite.
Okay, I finished the record cabinet.
That's beautiful.
And you remember what you promised that you would do once it was finished. It's time.
Fine.
Oh, God.
Right there?
Right there. Oh, just like that. Oh, that's the spot. Oh, yeah. That's just what I wanted. Oh, that's perfect. Get your mind out of the gutter. Huge shout out to my wife, who is such a good sport, even though she knows how dumb these little skits are. Again, please take that survey link down below and make sure you leave a comment so you can get entered to win the JB prize pack. As always, thanks for checking this one out, and I'll see you back here next time.